So previously on Insidious, we learned like father, like son, or something like that. Anyway, so little boy being chased and tormented by some demonic entity, and the family seeks out help, and these paranormal investigators show up to help him out. And we learn that the father had a similar situation, but was hypnotized to forget it because it was dangerous for him to remember it. But they had to remind him of what happened so he could go and save his son. You see, father and son have the psychic ability to project themselves into the astral plane, which basically just looks like the same house, the same set, but with the lights off, and dry ice fog rolling around. There you go. It works. But it ended on a cliffhanger as the entity that was chasing the father returns and takes him over. But no one knows it. The chief investigator knew it, but she got killed by the father, which still complicates things. I mean, you just tell the police, hey, look, he was possessed by a ghost. And the police, oh, well, all right. Besides, he talked to the spirit of the woman, and she's like, look, it's not your fault. Don't worry about it. Well, anyway, so they got quite the problem. And we learned that the spirit was this strange, witchy-looking woman, you know. Turns out it wasn't a woman at all. It was a guy who identified as a woman, but not by choice, you see. His mother was ahead of her time and was forcing her son to be a girl because she decided that was for the best. And particularly, she didn't like the boy's father. I guess he got the hell out of there. Sorry, son. So it was quite the Norman Bates deal here, and we see all of that. Now, as I stated in the review of Insidious for Insidious2, the Insidious deliberately puts itself pretty dependent on its sequel because it leaves on this cliffhanger. It crafts a story that's really more about the father than the boy in there, about what's happening, and the whole plot is to save the boy, which they do and all that, but it's revealing that this trouble with the father that's happening. And so it happens. He's taken over by this entity. He becomes cruel. The wife begins to suspect, but far too late. She ends up having to take the kids and lock themselves down deep in the basement, and he's beating the door in, about to smash his head through and say, here's Johnny. But meanwhile, the paranormal guys, what's left of them, are trying to help, and they recruit an old friend of Elise who died in the previous movie, but her spirit lives on, and he joins the team, and they're trying to catch him, and it doesn't quite work. Meanwhile, there's all kind of clues and whatnot, and what appears to be ghostly entities trying to contact the wife. Well, it turns out that's her husband. He's trying to contact her from the other realm that he's trapped in, but he can't quite get through, and she doesn't quite understand what she's hearing. Well, she can play the piano. She wrote a song for her husband, so she hears it, but her husband doesn't remember it because it's not her husband anymore. Well, here's where they do the thing that's pretty much the saving grace of it, because the whole thing that they built for it, its story structure that gave it more potential for being a franchise rather than the other offshoot, which was Sinister, was this business of the further, and to explore it further, which they do. And of course, you meet Elise in there. She's in there, and she just knows what to do because she's studied this sort of thing all her life. And we get to see her younger self and all that stuff. And that's the interesting thing. They do a sort of Back to the Future Part 2 aspect where they go back in time. And the thing of it is, in the further, the time is very different. And so he's not just seeing the past and the recent past, which is the previous film. It turns out some of the ghostly sightings they had was actually him. You know, and that's that kind of where I've seen other horror movies do that. There was this, I'm blanking on the name. It was a found footage movie about some people participating in a reality show, and they end up all getting killed off. And then they see their past selves coming to the show, and they try to warn them, but they can't. So it's that sort of thing where time is all warped for them as ghosts, and they're actually trying to warn themselves from what's happening. So there's scenes from the two different movies, and they coordinate it just right. And it's like, oh, yeah, it looked like the baby was in danger in the last movie. The wife saw a ghost in the window, and well, it was part of this. And it's clever how they linked it together and made that work. And so once they do that, they can also see into the past even further to find the true identity of this ghostly entity that's taken over the husband's body. And it was this man who was tormented by his mother. So he grew up to be a transvestite serial killer called the Bride in Black. And so there was this room in his old house, and all the dead bodies of his victims are in there. And he would go around killing all these women, probably because he had a very bad attitude about women in general, considering his mother was so evil, and at the same time probably jealous of them for being women, and he didn't get to be a woman. Because when he died, he went to the hospital. He was put in the hospital because he had tried to castrate himself. Don't know why he waited that long, but he did. And before he died, he met the Patrick Wilson character when he was a boy, and that's what started the whole thing. And but even his mother must have inherited some of this ability, played by Barbara Hershey in this, who you might remember her from The Entity. yeah. But anyway, she saw this guy, and then went to the nurse. Hey, who released him? And the nurse said, oh, he's dead. He jumped out the window. So there you go. It's off to the races at that point. So he was a serial killer called the Bride in Black, because he would. How do you get around? You're going to go and abduct these women and kill them at your house while wearing your outfit. But then again, the scene they show it, he's wearing it, in his house while he's getting ready to kill this one particular girl he's kidnapped and all that stuff. So you think, oh, well, that's when he did it. But there were news clippings and reports of people having seen the Bride in Black. So he walked around in public like this. Oh, well, I guess people just don't stare. So anyway, the real villain was his mother, but of course that doesn't forgive what he did. And he wanted to live again, and the mother's spirit was also there and kept pushing him, saying, you got to kill the whole family, otherwise you'll lose control of the guy's body and go back to the realm of the dead. But it looked like it wasn't going to work. I mean, literally, the Patrick Wilson was aging rapidly. His teeth were falling out. All this stuff. Said just the presence of the ghost in him was killing the body. So they got to rescue him from the further. And so they do. And his son, now this is where it kind of loses it. They had some clever things here, but the son realizes, I got to go save Daddy like he saved me. All I got to do is go to sleep. So he lays down and immediately goes to sleep. I mean, it perhaps should have been that the kid has figured out how to do this at will. That he can project himself, and that's like a step up above what his father was able to do. You had to do it while you're asleep. So I suppose you could take it as that the kid just figured it out, and in the stress of the moment, he does it while his possessed dad is beating on the door, coming to kill them all. So he gets in there, he finds Daddy, and then they stop the spirit of the crazy old mother who started all of this, with the help of the spirit of the crazy guy whose name was Parker Kane, I believe, or was it Kane Parker? I'm forgetting. Anyway, which is a bit odd. It's like, well, his spirit from the past is doing this, where his spirit of the present is in the body. Yeah, it's a bit confusing, but nevertheless, of course, they saved the day. Patrick Wilson is back to health in his own body and with his son, and the wife is okay, I guess it's you. And they're all fine. Well, now what do? You pretty much wrapped up the story, didn't you? Well, no, you've introduced this whole world and whatnot, and the paranormal investigators are sent on another case, and we leave off with that, where we meet another family who's very much in trouble with their daughter, who's catatonic, but well, I guess we know what that means. And so that appears to be the setup for the third film, which I will view and review here. on the Nailsin ratings. Yeah. So there's some stumbles and flaws in Insidious 2, but it's still a pretty good ride, and there's some little clever things they do with all the time warp stuff, even though it does confuse it in some aspects of it. But, it's a fun romp for the horror film.